Most of the time, we think we don't see the word shepherd there, do we? So, a herdsman or a sheep breeder or a cattleman says he also addressed the sycamore trees, and like I said, it sounded like he was just almost like they would cut into him to get the sap out of him. Something. But anyway, it says this is kind of a step above in socioeconomic class than a shepherd. So it says, according to our book, as I read through, keep going through here, that he was possibly upper or middle class of society since he owned his own sheep or goats or cattle, and it was possible that he even owned his own sycamore orchard. So, and it said here, where Tekoa's high elevation, sycamore groves could not grow in or near town. So it says that he nipped the sycamore trees down on the coastal plains, which means he was probably a traveler. And his travels put him in contact with many people, rich and poor alike, and he began to look beyond the confines of the southern kingdom and to the activities of the northern kingdom as well. Last thing here, and then we'll kind of get into the scripture. Amos wasn't he wasn't a professional prophet, and again, this is from the book here, but when God called him, nor had he any official prophetic training. But after God called him, he was compelled to prophesy because he declared, the Lord God hath spoken, who can but prophesy. And again, just as a little side note that usually, I guess, professional prophets, for lack of a better term there, it says even the sons of the professional prophets were usually considered to be apprentices and things like that who learned from a senior prophet. So it kind of gives us an idea there on who Amos is right here. So jumping from there, jumping into it right here, we're going to see these first two chapters. It's kind of like it's almost like a roll call of different kingdoms and cities. And one thing we need to keep in mind, if you look at the chart that I've created there for you as we go along, I have the kingdom and I have cities, but a lot of times you think of it like this. The term city-state was used back in these days. For a lot of cities, they almost operated like they were their own country, even though they were within the kingdom. So when these cities we see here, these cities get chosen for judgment and stuff. It's more representative of the entire kingdom as well. So if we look down there below it, again, I know that's pretty small, but I try to put the scripture there, so it's pretty easy to locate, and plus on the map right there we can see where these city-states are located in relative to Israel. So let's take a look here, and we're just going to start going right through here, like on the first the first two verses here in the chapter. It says, the words of Amos, who was among the herdsmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam the son of Joash king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And they said here this was a pretty devastating earthquake, and even my teacher's guide talks about that there is archaeologists have found evidence of a devastating earthquake that dates pretty close to this. So and he said, the Lord will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. Now we've seen that before with Joel. When we see the Lord will roar from Zion, what does that usually infer? What's coming?
Could they war?
A war? What else? Heard somebody else? Punishment. Yeah, judgment, right? So Lord's about to speak up, and there's things that are, there's issues here. So anytime we've seen that, we've seen that, some good things. There's some issues right there with the people, and judgment or punishment is coming. So, and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the habitations of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. So we start there, and now, like I said, the first two. So he pretty much he introduces himself in verse 1, and then in verse 2, it's like I've said, I was always in the 90s. I was a big Seinfeld people, and one of my favorite episodes is Festivus, when George's dad comes there. I got a lot of problem with you people. Pretty much what Amos is here. I mean, Amos this is who I am. And in verse 2, we got a problem, folks. So he's jumping right to it. You know, Paul, at least, you know, he always had that nice little, usually it says, Paul, a servant of Christ, my beloved, etc., etc. And then he kind of jumped into it, didn't he? But no, Amos gets to the point. So here we go. Let's take a look here. Verses 3 through 5 it refers to the transgressions of Damascus, and I kind of wrote it over there. We're going to see some different things. We're going to reference some verses here that kind of where these transgressions occurred, and some of these and some verses where these prophecies take place. But let's take a look here at what Damascus or Ammon, or probably Ammonites here. It says they threshed Gilead with threshing instruments, and I have down there war crimes. So if you look as we look at our map right there, we can kind of see just to the east of Israel, up towards the north right there, we see where I kind of had to insert Gilead. So there were Israelites people there, but you can see where that land, where that's located, where that's labeled. You can see two other kingdoms right there kind of overlapping it right there. So this was so probably what happened was here with Damascus, the kingdom of Aram Damascus right there, when they came in, there was just some terrible atrocities that were committed right here. They threshed Gilead with threshing instruments. That's one of those things there where, okay, so what does that mean? So does anyone, any of my agricultural folks here know what a threshing instrument is? A threshing instrument? Yeah, I see you shaking. I knew you'd know. A threshing instrument. Used to,
back in those days, it would have been like a scythe or something to cut
yep,
wheat.
that's one thing. So it's one of those things.
Back then,
Yeah.
now we think of mechanical threshing that does all that.
Correct.
But in those days, it would have been done by hand.
Done by hand.
Those big scythes.
And with those scythes to cut down the wheat. Also, they would make these. They'd make these tools, I guess, for lack of a better term. I guess I think of it from the way I could picture it. I'm not saying this is what it was. You ever seen like a drag they used to drag a baseball field with? You know, where it has little spikes in it. They would use that to kind of drag it through the field after they cut it down. I guess to help kind of get, like when you mow dead, you know how it is. Like you mow the grass and that dead grass builds up over time. So same thing. But what they would do when they conquered a people, they would bind the people up right there, and they would pull those instruments over the top of them. And it was just a form of torture, and as I said, it was horrible to think about. So just a tremendous war crime, and they were doing, and is what we would call it today. But this is referred to, if you want, like I said, if you want to jot some of these down to go see. But 2 Kings 10:32 kind of references this, and like I said, so when the people of Israel were conquered in that land, instead, it was kind of there were, there used to be rules for war. It was kind of, hey, you take these people prisoner and stuff. That's kind of the expected, but this obviously here this was going way too far. So now let's take a look from there, and let's see what the judgment's going to be right there. So we see in verse 3. They have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron. And in verse 4 or 5, what do we see there? What's going to happen to them? In verses 4, let's just start there.
There'll be a fire in the house.
House of Hazael, okay, which shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. And then we see it's going to break off also the bar of Damascus and cut off the inhabitant from the plain. And he that holdeth the scepter from the house of Eden, and the people of Syria shall go into captivity unto Kir, saith the Lord. And we're going to see here as we go on, we're going to see fire again repeatedly as an instrument of judgment. And I got some things there just for us to discuss. So right there, we're going to see the house of Hazael. That was Hazael was the king this time. and devoured the palace of Ben-Hadad. Now, when I did some research on the term Ben-Hadad right there were two things. There, one that kind of referenced that it was a son of Hazael, and I saw another term where it said that Ben-Hadad was also a term for a rank like king, or in other words, like Pharaoh, for example. The Pharaoh was the head of Egypt. There were some people that said that, so that was just some of the things there. So obviously, as you look at that, but we can see again, whatever it is, we got destruction coming. So they were going to be taken, and eventually, Damascus, those people would be taken in to captivity into Kir, K-I-R, and this is we see that in 732 BC they were conquered by the Assyrians, and there's reference to that in 2 Kings 16 and 9. So basically, sent fire to the house of Hazael, devoured the palace of Ben-Hadad, and then they were conquered by the Assyrians. And we're going to see some themes here coming up here. So that was kingdom of Aram, Damascus. Let's go on down now. Verses 6 through 8, we go to the Philistine states, which is down in the lower left. You see it in red right there. Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Ekron are the cities we're going to see mentioned right here. But if we look at it, in verse 6, what was their what was the issue there? What was their indictment, so to speak?
They deported the population.
Yeah, they deported the population. Not just a certain amount, but they deported the entire population. And again, back then, there were kind of some rules and standards for war. And it was kind of I think some of the reading I did, soldiers and maybe the ruling kings, they could capture those, but you just wasn't supposed to just take the entire population. And if we go on right there, from that, just some other things here. And they delivered them up to Edom. Basically, they sold the entire population into slavery. So, and here's the deal, according to some of the commentators, they were, where they're located, especially kingdoms and city-states that were right there on the port. Today, airports and things, that's the main way goods and services get moved around. But if you were on the port right there, financially, you were doing pretty good. So they sold these people simply to get more money. And what's the word that we could use to describe that? That's just greed, isn't it? So just simply greed was the issue here, and selling the entire group into slavery. And some of this, again, 2 Chronicles 21, 16, and 17, refers to that. Verses 7 and 8, we see again, the Lord's judgment is what? He's going to send fire to the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof. And it says he's going to, I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon, and I will turn my hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines shall perish, saith the Lord. That's utter destruction is what that sounds like to me. So, basically, again, we see this in terms that kind of, in the commentaries, you see the words, they say citadel, fortress, basically, you got to think, what was the main, how were cities in that day constructed? It's not like today where you can just drive in on the interstate, could you? Most of the time, most of those cities had a wall around them, didn't they? For the protection and things. It was so they were more like fortresses than they were really cities. And so we see again that Lord's going to send fire, and there's complete destruction. But here again, here's another theme we see coming up, and they eventually also this states or kingdoms, whatever, is conquered by the Assyrians. So we see there, what's the theme in the judgments right here? We see God sending fire, and what else? And with the Assyrians, he was allowing some of these enemies to come in and conquer them. Let's go now to verses 9 and 10, the Phoenician state and Tyre. We look, that's up in the northern part right there. Basically, around where modern day Lebanon is. And let's see what their issue was. It says, thus saith the Lord for three I meant to, and I've skipped over that. Look at the beginnings of each of those. I think that's it. It says, for saith the Lord for three transgressions of Damascus and for four. Jumped over my notes right there. Should have said something right there on that. You see that? For three transgressions and four. That's interesting. Just a term and time. And basically, it's worth noting that we see about almost if you look down there at the scripture, all five of those sets of scripture begins with that phrase, don't they? What does that mean, you think?
I remember correctly, I've read where that means basically in calculable number.
Yes.
Something that's just continuously happening over and over and over.
Correct, and that's kind of the way, like, and if you've ever been in the classroom, it's like, little Johnny, you're just late every single day, every day, and day, and day, and day, and day. It's just the same day, over and over and over. So it's just a way back, a term or a phrase to show, like Brother Nate said, just continue over and over. So basically, what it's saying is they are just sinning. It's not just 3 or 4 sins. It's just so many of them right here. It's just a way to. It's just a. Because if you just kind of take it at the surface right there, is he just punishing for 3 or 4 sins right here? Is that what we're saying? No, it's just there's so many of them. It's just can't put a number on. So I meant to cover that. So I apologize there. Oh, but yeah, where were we? We're at Tyre, right? So again, as the problem they have here, they delivered the entire population to Edom. But if you go back to 1 Kings 5, 10, and 12. What they did, the problem by them selling the people of Israel into slavery here was they had a treaty with them. They broke a treaty that goes back that's kind of listed there where in 1 Kings. And it just says here, treaties between neighboring kings were common. Kings would establish a mutual agreement among themselves to encourage trade and protect one another as equal partners. In the book of Kings, we see that there was an agreement between Hiram of Tyre and Solomon. And it says in the Near East, treaties between neighboring kings were common. They would establish so to encourage trade and protect one another. It seems like that's a repeat of something. My copy and paste got me there. But anyway, the text tells us that when Hiram heard about Solomon's plan to build a house for the Lord, he rejoiced greatly and gave Solomon as much as he desired of the cedar and cypress timber. Solomon then gave Hiram 20,000 cords of wheat as food for his households, 20 cords of beaten oil that Solomon would give Hiram year by year. And we're not told how Tyre violated their covenant with Israel, but the prophet tells us they did so. And that such a breach of the covenant made Tyre's sinful act of selling Israelite slaves to Edom even worse right there. So we look down right there again, and we go back to our scripture for Tyre. What's sent? Well, again, we see fire being sent to the walls of Tyrus, and which shall devour the palaces thereof. And also, we see later on, if we read in some of the history, I think we see that Tyre is attacked by the Assyrians many times, it says here. And it says that finally, the city was finally destroyed, which was kind of a fulfillment of a prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 26, 4 and 5. So again, they broke their deal. Now, who's my World War II history buffs here? Anybody? I know I am. I can remember I think reading about in 1940 when Germany had signed a non-aggression pact with Russia, and about 3 months later they invaded it. So that's kind of what it made me think of there. Not saying that's the exact same thing, but they broke the pact. They had a deal, and they broke the pact, so that's pretty serious business. Let's go to Edom now, verses 11 and 12. So now if we find Edom, that's down in the southern part below them right there. We can see we got 2 cities circled there. And as we look, let's see what their issue was. Now, what do we know about Edom? The name should jump out. We've talked about Edom here in the last few months.
Esau.
Esau, yeah. Y'all remember when we studied about Esau? So we can see right here, it says the Edomites were kinsmen to the Israelites. They both descended from Isaac by his twin sons Esau and Jacob. So we're familiar with Esau and Jacob, right? So despite the family ties, the Edomites and the Israelites barely displayed brotherly love for one another. These two people, groups, were continually fighting against each other throughout most of their history. Kind of sounds like the parallel of the relationship between Jacob and Esau, if y'all remember studying them. And it says here that when the Israelites were at Kadesh, a town on the edge of Edom's territory, they asked the Edomite king for permission to pass through his land. And however, the Edomites came out against Israel with heavy force and strong hand. This is referenced in Numbers chapter 20. And they denied passage through their territory, causing the Israelites to turn away from them. This set the stage for hostile attitudes, which continued throughout generations of time to the time of Amos. And it's referenced here, 2 Samuel chapter 8, 2 Kings chapter 8, 2 Kings chapter 14. So in the book of Amos, God said he would judge Edom because he had pursued his brother with the sword while he stifled his compassion. Basically, it just says the Edomites would attack the Israelites on numerous occasions, and many wars were fought as a result. And it says that Edom's anger tore continually, and he maintained his fury forever rather than trying to live in peace and help their Israelite brothers. The Edomites would pursue them with swords, and they showed no compassion and only anger and hostility. So from there again, we look at it. Verse 12, I will send fire upon Teman, which shall devour the palaces of Basra. And so we see there, if we look at Teman right there, Teman was more in the southern part of the kingdom of Edom, and Basra was up there towards the top. And it was kind of, some people were saying not only that did it destroy those cities, but everything in between on those. So finally we conclude chapter 1, and I'm going to pick it up right here a little bit with Ammon. And this one right here, probably when it comes to brutality, was probably the worst one of all that we see. So if we look in verse 13 right there, it says, "For saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have ripped up the women with child of Gilead, that they might enlarge their border." And so right there in verse 13, what's that? What atrocity were they committing? I mean, it's hard to even.
Yeah, killing the pregnant
They
women.
were basically, yes, they were murdering pregnant women, and just simply, and it says here simply for to enlarge their border. So let's kind of see, to me, like I said, it's even hard to even study this because of what was going on. But it says that the sons of Ammon were kinsmen to the Israelites because they traced their ancestry to the younger daughter Lot. Despite these ties, they treated Israel brutally. Their grievous sin is that they ripped up the women with child of Gilead that they might enlarge their border right there. So basically such murderous acts were a common feature used in the ancient world to decimate the enemy. It was just a very brutal and sadistic treatment of the women. To make it even worse, the motive was simply materialistic. They just wanted more land. But apparently they decided to be mean and brutal while they were at it, and that just made it even worse. And it's bad enough that they were, it's just simply greed. But to add that sort of atrocity to it right there, that makes it even worse. So again, we see right there that we see I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, and it shall devour the palaces thereof, and the kings and princes will be put in exile. So let's kind of look there. We got now that with that, just some of the questions down at the bottom there as we kind of as we look at it, and again, I don't have the copy. What's the first one? If I see somebody's sheet right there, I'll just kind of read these out. I could read my own writing from 11 o'clock. Yeah. So what do we know about these nations standing with God compared to Israel?
False worship,
They were false worshipers. Okay. What else?
idolatry.
Idolatry.
They're greedy.
Greedy. All right. So, but we see that in Israel and Judah. But are these nations of Israel, or would these be considered, I guess, for Gentile nations? Now, in the first couple of minor prophets, have we seen mention of the Gentile nations that has been prophesied or having prophecies spelled out for them? It's always been, like I said, in Joel and Hosea, it was always reference to who? Judah and Israel, correct? So we see something here. To me, that stepped out to me. Not only that, it's talking about destruction. We looked at locusts. We looked at this. Oh, I watched something on. Anybody know who David Attenborough is? He's like a native. Does like all the different planet Earth. So watching it, it was showing the locust. It was like locusts, and it was just. I wish if I'd had a way to show it, it would have showed what. I mean, it was like I think they said it was like a super swarm, 500 billion locusts somewhere in Africa somewhere. And you could probably saw, but anyway, I digress. So why, we see Gentile nations being put on the list here, and we'll kind of get to that here in just a second. But the next thing, again, there's no right answers here. This is kind of for some discussion that I wrote down. We see the Assyrians usually an instrument in God's judgment against these nations. As a conquering army. Why them? Just again, there's no right or wrong. Any thoughts there? See you smiling, so.
They were the most vicious, ruthless, heartless group of people that's probably ever been known.
Mm-hmm. So just, he's allowing that. They were. I guess that strokes. If you're sitting there listening, I guess, and he said, hey, this basically, with Assyria, that struck fear in.
There would be. It's been noted that there would be entire cities that would commit suicide if the Assyrian army came up to them.
Wow. I wouldn't wear that. That's pretty.
You're talking about a fortified city with a wall all the way around. Instead of fighting and taking the chance of being captured, the whole city committed suicide.
And, and I guess, as we get into, if you really want to, we talked about Day of the Lord and the judgment right there. For those that are not ready for that day, that can be something, kind of parallel that. All right. Next, well, here it says, with conquering armies, we see fire used in each prophecy. Why not just say, hey, the Assyrian army is going to conquer? It says, hey, he's going to send fire. What could be some of the symbolism with that? If any. I'm just saying, again, all that, there's no right or wrong here, just some things to discuss that come up as notes I make.
Well, obviously, like hell
Okay.
for one, but another may just be cleansing.
Yeah. Fire is usually an instrument of, you think about it, out west, the brush fire, natural, like for example, in the environmental science class I used to teach, natural fire was a regenerator, for ecosystems. It would help, clear out some of the underbrush and some of the unwanted or unused dead material right there, and it kind of speed up the process of regeneration. So so when we see fire right there, I think the same thing. It's just you think about it, you heat something up. That's how you sterilize things. So and in chapter 1 right here, what's missing from it that we see in Joel's prophecy? Hope. In Joel's prophecy, there's always, hey, this is pretty bad, but hey, there's a way out of it. Now, I'll have to admit, I have not read past chapter 2 yet. So maybe, as I say, there's more to come on that. Maybe perhaps we get to that. But right now, that's a change. That's definitely a change. So let's flip it over, and I really have to, but it shouldn't take as long here. So now we go to chapter 2. We just see more of the same. We turn to Moab now. If you look at Moab on your map, it's basically due east of the kingdom of Judah right there. So if we look at it, it says, "Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Moab and 4." So we know what that means. It says, "I will not turn away to punishment, because he burned the bones of the king of Edom into lime. But I will send let's see here. That doesn't look right. Let's see. Yep, but I will send it says Moab right there. So I will send a fire upon Moab, and it shall devour the palaces of Kira. And Moab shall die with tumult, with shouting, and the sound of the trumpet. And I will cut off the judge of the midst thereof, and will slay the princes thereof with him," right there. So basically, exhuming and desecrating the king of Edom's bones, and then burning them. Even today, that we would look at that with just aghast, but it was very, and I won't say it's not today, but especially back in this day and time, how those that have died were buried. That was very sacred right there. That would be that's one of the ultimate disrespect, so to speak, there. So as we look at it, right here with Moab, it says the Moabites were kinsmen to the Israelites, because they can trace their ancestry back to the older daughter of Lot. They were a pagan people who worshipped a god named Chemosh. They would be and it says here that they were judged for their transgressions of burning the bones of the king of Edom. In the ancient world, it was very important for a man's dead body to receive proper burial. That's why tombs often had curses inscribed on them to protect them from being desecrated or treated with indignity or disrespect. So the Moabites, that was kind of what that was their transgression. And we see fire being sent to devour the palaces of Kira, and Moab shall die with tumult and shouting with the sound of a trumpet. So it says there, I will cut off the judge from the midst thereof, and will slay all the princes thereof with them, right there. So it would cause basically, in other words, it says God's going to send an enemy nation to wage war, and guess who they fell to? The Assyrian Empire. So now, at this point, all those people being mentioned, those weren't people of Israel. Now, I could probably sit there, like I said, it's a lot easier. Isn't it easier to point out everybody else's faults than to introspect on ourselves right there? So I could see, and again, just trying to put it in a term where we can understand, those probably, they're bad people. Yeah, they're getting what they deserve. Yep, I agree totally. That group over there, they're bad. And they go, now, let's see who's next in line. Verse number 4, it says, "Thus saith the Lord, for these transgressions of Judah." So they're probably, the mood after they were sitting there, it's like, we ever seen that? And then, now let's go to Judah. Let's go to God's people here. Read through there. What was their big, what did they do? What's their transgression?
They rejected the law.
Yeah. Why do we not see that? I mean, obviously, all of those transgressions that we saw before of those 6 nation states or city states, those were definitely against God's law, but that's not how we see them being specifically laid out. Why this? Yeah, I think that what we saw right there between, the atrocities that were committed, those go against God's law. But he only uses that, we see it here to this point, against Judah. Again, all those surrounding nations were those God's people. So the Philistines, Ammonites, Phoenicians, Moabites. Would they be under the covenants that the people of Judah and Israel would be? So this here, this would be even a graver I don't say accusation, but a graver indictment. It says, but unlike the pagan nations, Judah and Israel had a covenant relationship with the Lord, and they were a covenant people of God and agreed to live by His covenantal laws. And so it's it just talks about how many times the people agreed to abide by this covenant, but they had rejected God's law, which they in Exodus 24:7 they promised to keep. So we see here that in the second part right there it says have not kept His commandments, and their lies caused them to err, and after which their fathers have walked. So basically, not the transgression. We're going to get into that a little more in the discussion here at the end. Not keeping the law, not keeping the Lord's commandments, and again we see fire being sent upon Judah and it shall devour the palaces of Jerusalem right there. So, and then finally we go to Israel, and really probably just now that we only got 7 minutes, probably need to pick it up there, because if we look here and read the next 10 verses, we kind of see each one of those indictments of those city-states right there. Basically just one, hey, you sold them into slavery. Yeah, y'all did this. But now, the people of Israel, they get a long list of things right here. And I think what we're going to do right there, just as I said, I don't want to rush through that, because we're going to pick it up there, and then we'll go into chapters, to the other chapters next right there. So, but we can see, again, got some other thoughts there, but I think it's right there. You had the first six nations that were brought up, kind of pagan, Gentile nations, whatever you want to call them. And then, like I said, I can just picture them going, yeah. And then it's like, ooh, we messed up too. And see that a lot. It's kind of, the thing I put down was, how many times is it, do as I say, not as I do. And like I said, it's a lot. We're pretty quick to point out the problem. If you've ever worked in a place, well, if so and so down there in that department would get their act right, I could do my job better. It kind of gets back in one of those. Make sure your own house is in order first, right? Same way. Man, if that quarterback can deliver the ball, yeah, Scott. How about your offensive line giving him time to throw? So we're always looking for it, because it's pretty hard. I mean, it's hard, but the thing is when we turn self-introspect on ourselves and really be truly honest, that's how we grow. When we admit, that's hard to get young people to do, because they don't like that self-criticism. They don't like self-criticism. But those, the good ones are, especially, and I'll use the athletics background, but the guys that come in that are truly honest of, my steps to, whatever, that are truly completely honest, those are the ones that grow and get better. And I think as Christians, we need to do that as well. Just always introspect where we are, with ourselves, with our relationship with the Lord, and then, make sure we're right there, and then go out and, from there. So, but anyway, like I said, we're gonna pick it up right there. We're gonna look at Israel and what their transgressions and judgment is, because again, I think really I said everything we talked about right there was leading up to that, and I just don't want to rush through that. So, anybody else got anything?
The sycamore fig trees. When I think of figs, because they said they were being slashed and that they were sweeter once they had been slashed.
Yeah, what I pictured, I'm not saying this is right, was just almost like, you know, like they do in Vermont, you know, where they put, you know, somehow they were, some of the things I read on some of the commentary was somehow it would make the sap, whatever it was in there, the liquid fluid in there, somehow made it sweeter or something. I think they gathered it, but I'd have to,
So it's just the sap from the.
that's what I thought. I'll have to,
Not the,
yeah.
and not the fig
I
itself.
think so, but I'll have to, because really I was kind of got a general idea, because I really didn't get to study it, but that's just from, off the top of my head from looking at it, that's what. It just reminded me, when I sat there, it just reminded me of, like I said, a Vermont, or, you know
Yeah,
how
I've
they.
seen them get the sap out.
Yeah, you know, it was almost like they put
In
a,
Alabama, we used to have the sweet gum trees
Mhm.
that you got the sap out, and they were big trees.
yep,
But our fig bush, I call
Yeah.
a fig, it's more like a fig bush than, when I think of the tree, I'm thinking big around. So a fig bush and a fig.
Yeah, I'll try to-
tree are not
I'll try to find a little more on
exactly
that.
the same thing to me.
we'll come back since I'm on
These are
that.
sycamore figs.
I'm gonna try to get this book finished, so I hand it off to you, Wayne. Saying I'd pick it up out of the ranch, but,
Jesus cursed the fig tree and it withered.
so. I'll make it up, I'll see if I can find more on that,
Okay, well, I mean,
because it's getting me now, because I was like, I thought about that. All right, nothing else, close with a quick word of prayer, and Lord, again, thank you for this day, thank you for this opportunity, Lord, thank you for bringing us all here, Lord, be with those families who aren't able to be here, be with those who may not be here, Lord, that you know the reason, Lord, just let them feel comfort, Lord, again, we're just so thankful for your patience with us, Lord. Lord, thank you for all your grace and your blessings. Lord, be with us as we go through our service. Be with us as we are about to change into our building phase, Lord, of our church. Just lead, guide, and direct us in